Hey, and welcome to the Weed Out, where we weed out the nonsense and talk about the ghouls in our backyard. This week, Joanne and I are back, full steam ahead, and we have close friend of ours. It's actually my family, my other half, Bridget Kearney. She's a social worker, specifically an LICSW. She'll tell you a little bit more about that, and just wanted to bring another perspective of working class people, as always. And why not go with somebody that I know pretty well and trust and know their character. So when they're speaking about these kinds of things, you listen. And it's important to platform people that are out there doing the work, and especially people that are very aware of the flaws in the system that they work in. And there are parallels for me, and Bridget will probably agree with me that she's had many late conversations with me asking questions about, like, if this, it's about like cops, like if the system's bad and you're in it, like, can you be a good social worker? Can you be a good cop? And they're really complicated conversations, but they're good ones to have. And so we just want to bring in this person's voice that we can vouch for. And so Joanna, I just want to say, hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up? Happy New Year, everyone. I'm so excited that Bridget can join us. If she doesn't know it already, I think she's just a superstar of a person. And I don't think people understand what it's like working with people in the community when they're dealing with some, really challenging things. The police will say they do, but I think with all its flaws, social workers definitely know a little bit more about how to potentially be caring for the community. And I'm so thankful for people like Bridget who can reflect on the systems that we have that we're in. And I'm just so excited to get to hear about more about your background and what you do every day, even though I know some. And thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. I'm like a real dork about social work, so I'm excited to like geek out with y'all.
That's good because we're both dorks and geeks. I feel like. So perfect place to be. Well, so Bridget, we'll just dive right in. I guess we introduced who you are in our lives and that you're an independent licensed social worker. And if I didn't get that right, please correct me. But I guess if you want to talk about your how you would introduce yourself and your role, and you can go into that as much as you feel comfortable.
So I am Spencer's wife, partner. I've noticed I've been mentioned a couple times now by name on this pod, and Joanna's dear friend, and I'm really excited to be here, like I said. So I am an LICSW, licensed independent clinical social worker. So I can talk about this maybe at a later point, but that just means that I have been practicing for a certain amount of time and hours. So when you get out of school, you need a master's degree, and then you can pass your first board test and you become an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. And then you have to practice for another 2 years. And then you can sit for an independent exam, which means that I can practice independently without supervision. The state of Massachusetts trusts me with that responsibility. So I could do with that, I could be an independent therapist and like have my own practice, essentially, is why people get that certification. And I can also supervise LCSW or graduate, students. So currently I work as a medical social worker. I work with Cooley Dickinson's primary care practices, and I support the patients there. The practice will refer, or the insurance will refer patients that are experiencing, high need psychosocial issues. They're high utilizers of the system. They're going to the ER all the time. They're costing the system money. And often that, as I think is repeated in a lot of areas of society, that usually means that they have a lot of needs that impact their physical health. And if we can get them some resources, they can often stabilize. So it ends up saving the system a lot of money to hire social workers and nurses that like follow patients and check up on them, remind them about appointments, get them connected to housing, get them connected to financial supports, mental health care, all that kind of stuff. And it helps, stabilize their medical conditions. And then I'm also a therapist. I have about 20 to 25 clients, depending on their motivation. And I see those folks right here in this room. So
Awesome. And I guess like social work can be a large encompassing term. So that helps me understand like what your background in social work like does, but I've met other people. So there's like case management or like different things
Mhm.
that I've seen as I've gone through my degrees and like therapy and all of those things. So I guess like it's such a broad, I just like a broad field. Can you like kind of explain to people a little bit more like how the multi-natured roles of social workers within society and like what other places we would see social workers, I guess?
yeah, for sure. So I think when most people think of social worker, they think of the Department of Children and Families. So that would be Child Protective Services, which, we can talk about as like, the more like carceral kind of brand of social work, the more like police adjacent brand of social work. Not that it's not a complicated issue, but that's, I think, what most people think. And then there's also, case management generally is what a lot of people do. It's what I would classify as like my day job is, supportive case management. You could find social workers kind of anywhere, certainly in like primary care practices, hospitals, schools, nursing facilities, libraries, kind of anywhere. A lot of towns will employ a social worker. Certainly like the senior center always has one. So really anywhere that you might find a population in need of service. And I mean, like the profession itself came about because a rich white woman in the 1800s decided there's this huge gap in need in Chicago. There's all these immigrants coming in and nobody is serving them. And this was before like the social support programs existed. So she was like, hey, I see people that need something. I have resources. So she created this place called Hull House. And it's what we learn about in school as like the birth of social work, Jane Addams. And it was a rooming house for immigrants, for people that were houseless, for, poor folks to come. And it was like a hub for resources. So she kind of really pioneered like the social services. This is how I learned it. There might be people that can fact check me, but this is how I learned it. So yeah, and actually Hull House still stands, which is kind of cool. But it's sort of like the fact that it started there is fascinating to me because there's really a through line of rich white women, not discounting myself here, that are able to pay for this, for a program, for a master's program, and then kind of like go out into the world to like help the needy. And most social workers you'll find are incredibly passionate about like the mission, right? Incredibly passionate about helping people and like, improving people's lives. And that's part of our code of ethics is service. So that's wonderful. And it's why I do it, but it's also kind of like a con because we are often like paid so little that we could qualify for the services that we're giving our clients. And yet we're like supposed to be held apart from them. And it's sort of expected like, well, you would do this for free, right? Like you're so giving, you'd want to do this for free. And I think it creates just a really problematic narrative that really serves capitalism, right? Like, and oh my gosh, the nonprofit industry generally is like a whole other conversation.
When I came out of school with a master's in clinical psych and wanted to practice, the amount of money that I was initially offered was so low and so hard to live on. And I feel like it's such an important, like if there is such a need for clinicians in our society and in many roles, that I was kind of shocked by that. And so now, like, just going back to like carceral things in the police, when you look at those budgets and those things, rather than like teachers or social workers or any clinicians anywhere, I even think back to domestic violence shelters, and those
Right.
workers, may not be social workers necessarily, but they're still doing something. And you're right, it's such
100%.
it's a taxing job where like your own needs definitely need to be met, I think, to be able to be of service to others. So and I think it's a good to point out that not everyone's able to just serve the community without having their own needs met either. Like,
Well, and I think like
it's a lot to expect of people.
and it becomes a real barrier for the field to diversify. So like Smith went through this locally a few years back. Like, so I went to Simmons College in Boston, and we still had our own issues with diversity, but there was more options. Like there was a part-time program, there was an online program. Smith was like uniquely positioned as this really rigorous program that did a lot of social justice work, but because it was full-time, you had to like basically have a full-time internship. Like you kind of can't work for pay, and the internships are free, which that's again a whole other conversation. But so they were having a real issue like recruiting a diverse student body, and it's just like a fact. You won't get diversity of race, ethnicity, age, class if there's these barriers in place where you're telling me I have to work for 6 months for free, 32 hours a week, which I did. But I was kind of one of the few students that was working on top of that, because I don't, people came for money, that's just what it is.
Right.
And I felt like our school tried to, introduce that topic in classes. And, the whole point of the program is to talk about the person within the system and how the system impacts upon the individual. But there was still like, a lot of people that I wonder about being out in the world and interacting with a diverse group of populations. Because I just think that, I think the field itself has a lot to reckon with in terms of like who they expect to be the population of people that are doing this job. You know what I'm saying? And making sure it's equitable and making sure it's accessible, to the communities that they're serving, right? Because like, why shouldn't people from the communities be able to do this work? Like there's a lot of gatekeeping, I think.
And just, I'm the grunt in the room. So just want to make sure the other grunts who are listening to this show picking up on this stuff as somebody that's never worked in that kind of system. I've only worked for pure capitalists. So it's a little more straightforward. But I guess what I'm hearing is the diversity issue is even if you check off certain boxes, skin color, whatever, class is an issue. And then how can people from a different experience truly be able to help somebody that they've never experienced? And it's not to say that everybody's experience has to be like perfectly aligned, but if there's no avenue for passionate young people, or people, doesn't have to, age doesn't matter, especially in social work, right? I mean, I feel like there's people jumping in and out of that industry. Anyways, it's what I'm hearing is it's kind of like when I was in New York City, Bridget was there for this. I was trying to be a musician and not saying I was a good one and I deserved anything, but like you can't hack that shit while you're working a kitchen job and paying for your shitty apartment,
right?
Not putting any equity in. And right. Neither Bridget and I grew up poor. And seeing people that are living in a loft in Williamsburg in a brand new condo, and their parents are paying for that shit, and they live in Long Island or whatever. And it's like, I don't want to begrudge that, because like, cool, but like, of course no wonder Taylor Swift is famous. Like,
Totally.
Like, and then don't forget all the connections. So yeah, what I'm hearing is like the inverse of that is like the social worker. It's like, you're only going to get these people that, unfortunately, some people are going to have ego. They might put their ego into it, and they may have good intentions, but tons of good intentions. That's how we have the carceral system, because there was a good intention. Like, well, we got rid of slavery.
I think there's a couple of good points in what you said. There is like the class issue has been there since the beginning. And like I mentioned Jada Adams, because I think she was an incredible person, and really meant well and really loved the community she was serving. But there is a problem when you stand apart from that community, and social work has constantly striven to set themselves apart from the communities that they serve. And there's a whole issue with like unions too, where DCF, God bless them, are the only ones that are unionized. Social work has made it their kind of mission to alienate like unions and do some union busting, frankly, because we are supposed to be a professional class of people. So if we're serving people that are blue collar, we can't also be unionized and sort of in the same class as them. We need to sort of be a cut above. And they've constantly been trying to seek validation from like the corporations from whom they are getting funding, right? And I think it's also how they try to attract, professionals. And it's just like this whole kind of like we had like a whiff of unionization at Cooley and they really freaked out. Like it's definitely a huge issue. And I think you're right that like, how can you truly understand what it is that, people need if you really have never had that experience? And it's not to say you shouldn't be in the work, but it's to say that you have a lot of extra steps in order to really learn what privilege you are bringing to the table and like recognize that. And that's where I think there's a lot of work to be done. So.
And all that's okay. It's good that we're having the conversation. So
yeah, it's not to discount like people's intentions or anything like that, but it's, it's the classic like intent versus impact. Like I think there's a lot of harmful impact that happens within social work, right? Like I'm helping people get these like crumbs that are, a mishmash of funding because according to me, in my humble opinion, they are not receiving the services that they should be receiving from the government, from the federal government or the state government. And so we are like patching together this network of services from like well-meaning 503Bs or whatever the hell, so like, it's problematic.
Yeah. And it's really tough because that's sad I feel like you said, again, that's a taxing mental thing for the people doing it because you eventually run out of options if it's crumbs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's really difficult. A lot of what we're saying though, kind of brings me to the question about how you can think about abolition and social workers' roles if social work were to reflect on like abolition and be a part of it, what that could look like.
So initially, like, in 2020, when there was a lot of conversation after George Floyd about, either adding social workers to police forces or replacing police that were responding to situations with social workers, I was really excited. I thought that was an opportunity.
I was too, Bridget. I was like, okay, no gun at least. Good. Yay.
Right. And I have worked in inpatient psychiatric units before. I came into this with, honestly, it's almost embarrassing to say, a ton of compassion for patrol officers because so for example, on a psychiatric unit, and I was dealing with teenagers, not even adults. It's kind of a different thing with adults, but there were some big kids and you do have to think about control. Or at least that's the context I always thought of it in, because if I was supervising a shift and I had, 15 kids, if they get sort of out of control, quote unquote, like there's going to be an issue and it's going to be unsafe. And so sometimes we made decisions based on needing control versus needing the child to have a good outcome. And that's when it was always the worst kind of thing, like, because we would have to do holds and things like that. And it was always the most traumatic when I made the decision, like, I'm losing control and I need to regain control. So I would put them in a prone hold, for example, which is an incredibly traumatic thing for any person to go through. And so I would always think about that when I watch a stop, like you watch the body cam video or whatever, I would think this individual thinks that they are losing control of this interaction and they think that they need control of it, or else it will undermine them. It'll undermine safety. And so they're doing whatever they can to regain control. And that becomes unsafe just inherently. And again, like there's so many offshoots I could go into. It's a whole other conversation about whether inpatient psychiatric care should even be a thing, because it is incredibly carceral. And, there's a lot of evidence to suggest it's not helpful clinically, but for lack of other options, it exists. Same with the police currently.
And for safety reasons, I do understand, like thinking
Right.
like about not even
100%.
It's sometimes also like the child's safety may be the thing
So,
you're
like,
thinking of potentially.
Right. And so like involuntary psychiatric commitment only happens when there's a direct threat of harm to self or others. Talking about like carceral social work, in my mind, it is about like that kind of psychiatric care and about child protective services. And in both cases, it's super challenging because I know a ton of really incredible, passionate, wonderful social workers and clinicians that do this work and do it for the right reasons and really care, right? But the system kind of forces you into a mode where you are surveilling and you are seeking control, and it's really hard. And I think there's a lot of like rumors and kind of things. I hear people saying things like on the internet about DCF that I'm like, that's just not true. I mean, maybe it's just not true about Massachusetts. Like, you're not pulling a kid from their home because their parent like can't afford things like that. That's not happening. But you know, every state is different. All that to say, I think social workers can be helpful within these systems to reduce harm. And we have to reimagine these systems in order to eliminate the harm. You know?
Yeah, totally. I even think like the language, like you're saying, I hadn't thought of the control thing. Because you like need to control the scenario or the situation because for safety reasons. But I think even like, and I think of police training, I want police abolished even, but I don't think their training is probably saying to them, like the terminology, and I'm sure it's similar for social workers, how often will drive how we end up acting or feeling about the scenario, like you're saying. So I do think that it is much more attractive if we can't reach an abolition, which it's not going to happen quickly, but to have trained individuals who can de-escalate situations without using a gun, because I do feel after the summer of 2020 that, and I'm sure you may agree, that it was just so much more apparent once you started really looking at police departments across the United States, how often to gain the control, they were using their firearm, not a hold even potentially.
Yeah,
and that part's really upsetting and shocking.
Right. I mean, to get back to your original question, which I like straight away from, I think I was really hopeful for the possibility of social workers within a police force to either respond with the officer and help to de-escalate or just like generally reduce harm. But I think what we see is, and like the code of ethics in social work is about dignity of the person, it's about service, it's about the person within the environment. So like, how do they fit in? I already kind of mentioned this, how do they fit into the system that they're working within? But like dignity of the person is like one of these like tenets that you are working for. So you're always trying to uphold that. And it's like, what is this person's goal and how can I help them achieve that? So like you said, there's a completely different like language around it. The police officer probably is thinking, how do I maintain control so that I can keep like these other people in this town safe, right? If we're giving them the total benefit of the doubt, it's like,
right.
How can I just manage this situation as quickly as possible? And, you know, if you've ever been in the company of someone who's experiencing a psychiatric crisis, like it is not a quick situation and it requires a ton of patience. It requires a ton of like sitting with the person, being with them. So like what we've seen is that social workers responding with police really aren't impacting anything, you know, in a positive or negative way, like by any real measure. Like it's kind of neutral in my mind, because ultimately the officer has the final say about what's going to happen. And, you know, you watch this all over the internet, like they completely mock and undermine the social worker. Like it's kind of outrageous, but I do know some social workers that work in Boston, and they've like completely bought in. Like they really feel like they are, you know, impacting the community, and they sort of, these are their colleagues now. So they of course like and trust their work colleagues, and I think kind of lose sight of the harm that's done. And these are also of course progressive communities that are going to hire social workers to go out. But just to like round that out, I think where we've seen social work response teams or clinical response teams that don't involve an armed officer, that's where we see a positive impact, because they actually will take the time, just like a mobile crisis team, to de-escalate the person properly, to offer them that dignity of space, and then to know what's available. Like, okay, what's our next step here to help you get the support you need? But there's always the risk, like you guys interviewed person from Pittsfield, you know, that individual, Miguel, had a social work response team. And then a couple hours later, the armed officers responded, and it's devastating what happened. So we're still really not there yet by a long shot. you know? And again, like you guys, I think have said this quite often. We don't know what the answer is, like, you know, but we have to have some creativity here. Like the current system is incredibly, incredibly harmful. So
No, totally. And I do have hope for the response teams and systems where we see, even locally, like Amherst and Northampton, that have departments where it will be trained individuals, social workers, clinicians, whoever that are not the police, that are not armed, so that it isn't the police that are kind of with you making events, being the ones that can call the shots.
mhm.
I mean, there are so many psychological studies that show too, like it would make sense that people you mentioned would end up becoming a part of the workforce with the police, because I mean, there are so many studies that just show like you kind of do fall into that role when you think you have power and authority over others. It can be hard to kind of treat people with the full dignity they need. And I don't think the social workers in that case actually can really do anything, because if I were out with the cop and they had the gun, I would just listen eventually to what they said
And
too.
like
So
when
that's
I
the
worked
thing.
on the psychiatric unit, like there were times when we would take the kids out into the community for like a little like activity, and one of them would, you know, have a hard time. And there was a couple times where we like our protocol was to call the local PD if we kind of lost control of the situation. And these were children. And I have this traumatizing memory for me of this 8-year-old who they basically just sat on top of in the ambulance. And it was all about like, okay, the social workers failed, like we're coming in. They were really like, yeah, we got this, like really blasé, and we're so awful. They were, I mean, and this was Brookline, Massachusetts, which is a very rich, very progressive city. You know, basically right outside Boston, part of Boston. And it was horrific. And of course, this was a Black child. I went with her to the ER, sat with, like, it was just, you know, I rode in the ambulance and they were just being awful. And she was a child. She couldn't have weighed more than 60 pounds soaking wet. And the amount of force that they used, it was like, it really was illuminating, honestly. Like, but again, like if I'm going to extend every possible benefit of the doubt, their training, like, you know, often they are trained in de-escalation, but ultimately their goal is different. Their goal is control. Their goal is submission. And they figure you're calling us in because you can't handle this. So we're going to do what we do. And I've met tons of like, you know, a lot of really like lovely individual officers like doing this work. Like I've had to section people and I've had good experiences too, but like when it goes bad, it goes really, really fucking bad. And it's just not worth it. Like it's not worth it for the, you know, 10 nice guys that do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And we see it all over the country and every state. And I think more and more people are sharing that the statistics that the cops can't control, the cops can't control themselves once they think they've lost control, I think.
And
is
I
the
think
problem.
I started to say this like when there was this one instance with this one teenager who was like twice my size, and I was supervising the shift and I felt responsible to keep my coworkers safe and to keep the other children safe. And this child was really physically out of control, had like really lost control of their body. And this is where I kind of chuckle when like cops always want to joke like, oh yeah, if they like pull in, you know, if they like assault you, yeah, I've gotten punched in the face, I've gotten urinated on, like, you know, this kiddo punched me in the face, and like we just were like, we got to put her down. Like we put her into a hold right away. And it's like I think about it all the time because she was like in such crisis, and I just sort of like dissociated and was like, we gotta do something. And so we really like went, I think kind of, I don't know, I think too hard. I think about it a lot, and I wonder, like, they feel threatened. Like I know that feeling of being like, I'm physically threatened and I'm scared and I need to do something. And so I feel like what would happen if I had a weapon? Like I kind of have some semblance of understanding of that feeling. And you feel like this person actually wants to do me harm and they're not in their right mind or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no. And I also understand wanting to remain safe and keep them safe, and that their options are limited within the systems that we have. But you're right. I'm thankful that like we are not armed and clinicians are not like, like
Right.
I'm very thankful
Because
that
like
that's,
we're humans at the end of the day. And so like, this is why like you kind of can't be an ethical cop because you're operating in a system that's seeking control. And I think there's an argument to be made that you can't be an ethical social worker in a way because you're operating within a system that is propping up this like capitalist nightmare, right? Like we're plugging in the holes in the ship, you know, to make it seem somewhat functional.
So to like kind of tie this all together with like being also part of the working class, where I feel like because you have a master's degree, you kind of get slotted into the quote unquote professional, and that's done on purpose. It's like a front of house, back of house,
Right.
class warfare bullshit.
Right.
And they go after a specific personality type with a specific backgrounds. We talked about all that. And literally we talk about the outcomes with people that don't have weapons or have the main tenets of their goal are literally different. Cops want to control. We've had so many people say it in so many different ways on this podcast alone. Everybody has their own way of saying it, but they want to get from point A to point B. They want to solve this problem in the most Tim the Tool Man fucking Tim, and that's me being funny and like humanizing them, and like they're just not meant for this fucking job. These personality types, whatever. It's a nepotism filled thing. They're hiring the same fucking personality type. I've been in kitchens. You get fucking typecast. It happens. I'm trying to say, let's get away from that shit. It's toxic. It's bad for everybody. So,
well, I think Bridget pointed out a good point, and I've seen some research at in my own work where their community members are now like, so like clinicians, I don't know if they're social workers in this particular study that I've like worked on, but it's you'll go into a community that maybe needs to be served, and again, you're maybe not part of that community, but you pair up with leaders and people who are, you know, like people that you would look up to in that community, people who are part of that community, and you train those people how to ask the community members what they need and almost be like an intermediary between like the researchers who are hoping to see what's going on and train. So sometimes it will be like diabetes care in certain communities in Springfield or Holyoke, or it will just be how to get resources like you're talking about, because sometimes it's really hard to advocate for yourself and know what you need if you're not part of a community like all of us. So I think, I don't know if you have anything to say about that type of work that I've seen, but I found it to be so interesting. And I felt like it was probably more meaningful in some ways for community members to feel safe, because sometimes it's like their pastor or a mutual aid group that they'll start working with. And I found that to be a really nice, there's like a push in our own in universities for research that where you embed like community and helping communities. If you're going to actually use them as study participants, ethically, we've like come to this place where like you need to actually give the community like something to take away from and kind of pair with them, not just utilize them as participants. So I think that, I hope that, so I really, it could be the School of Social Work. So that's on me because it was a while ago that I read this study, but it definitely is like clinical work. And I wonder if that makes you feel hopeful, Bridget, because for me, I was like, okay, this is really cool. I hope I see more of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening a lot in the substance abuse community, like substance use disorder, you know, there's a lot of different like modes of treatment. And there's a lot of like recovery coach positions listed. And this goes back to kind of what I was talking about, where social work really wanted to professionalize the field and sought all of these sort of like barriers to entry in order to prevent just anyone from calling themselves a social worker, which I feel kind of torn about, because in one way, like I worked really hard for my degree. Like I know a lot about what I do, and I don't want like some Yahoo calling themselves a social worker, but
no, I completely agree. And thank you for getting your degree and all of that.
But on the other hand, it's kind of fake news in a way, like, because there's a lot of good that community members can do with mutual aid. That's the exact same thing, right? So there's a lot more positions opening for, they're looking like, for example, in that specific field for people that are in their own sobriety journey that can counsel other people in that. And that is 20 times more valuable than me saying the same exact thing to them. And there's things that I would never know to say, right? So that's hugely important. And like support groups serve this function. You know, a lot of times I'll recommend a support group over individual therapy because and this is where we can get back to like the capitalist nightmare, because like as a social worker doing therapy, you will very often hear me say like, yes, you're depressed. You might have a diagnosis of depression, but also like, here are the systemic forces that are working upon that depression. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. And this is where I chose social work over counseling, over, you know, psychology, because it was so clear to me, like how that worked together. And that so like part of the social work code of ethics is you need to be always working on the system to improve it for your clients. If you're not doing that all the time, you are not upholding the code of ethics. So like you need to be doing advocacy, you like legislative work, like policy work, like that's part of what we do as a profession, is try to make things better upstream for people. So all that to say, yes, it's like starting to happen. And I think it's like sort of gray area because there are some people that are a bit touchy about it because it sort of threatens the professionalization of the field, you know, so.
Like policing or any other system in America, it's steeped in white supremacy.
100%.
But the one thing about the social work aspect where you, like, at least there's a literal tenet to like fix
Right.
part of your ongoing journey. Everybody, I mean, it's having conversations about it. It doesn't have to be all formal. Like you brought up like very formal, recognizable things, but even having this communication with your friends within your social work group friend, you know, and then also out and about with normies that are just, you know, they do their job, they're accountants or this, they're that. Like, you know, we don't all have to know everything. And social work, probably it's still a system built by white supremacy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's just, we just got to look at the system. We got to address the system, call out what it is. And, you know, the end goal is do no harm. But where I was thinking about, like, think about the approach of somebody coming up, well, like you said, take the time, be patient, versus guys rolling around in souped up SUVs, armored, you know, with a semi-automatic in the trunk. And they show this stuff off on cops. They show it off to WWLP and Mass Live, and it's a flex. And they drive around their like stealth vehicles, and it's like, and then they clank up your front steps while you're having a mental breakdown because your wife left you because you spent all your money on crypto. And
very specific situation.
Like, dude, how many people, like in 2008, it was the housing crisis, you know, like now the crypto fallout's going to be crazy. I mean, it is
in certain communities,
and they were being called out like 2 years ago. Hey, regardless. How is it supposed to go down if they're rolling up like soldiers? It's about approach, and like their approach is clearly control. And I question anybody's code of ethics, personal code of ethics, if I challenge you and you're willing to listen to somebody like me, not me personally. I'm not the only person with these ideas or their own ideas. Challenge and like, are you sure this is the way we should do things? Like, I mean, it's pretty fucked up that we would let people starve. And don't ever let anybody say, well, what are you doing about it? Fuck off, man. Like, I'm having this conversation with you right now. Your child is moving past it. Like, that's part of it. And there's no agreeing to disagree on human rights. And just like, also, what? Like, what are we doing here? You think this is a race? Like, first man to like live longest wins? Like, weird. So it's just with the working class stuff, I just really want to hammer this home, because I feel like a lot of people have really negative interactions with social workers. Some people, or at least you don't have a cop show where it's like bum with all these cool
Yeah, we need more propaganda. That's the answer.
So it's like, you don't have propaganda, and like when you're in the propaganda, you're the bad guy. You're the fuck up. They the kids getting beat.
Oh, also, we are Mariah Carey wearing like an ugly suit in that movie. Do you guys remember that?
No.
The movie Precious. Mariah
Oh,
Carey
I never
played the
saw
social
that.
worker, and she had like a prosthetic nose, and like it was great. And they were like, "This is what social workers look like." And she was like wearing this like beat up sweater. I was like, it's not completely wrong.
Well,
But
no,
like that's the image, is like we are
No, yeah.
policing communities. We get more heat than how is this possible? You're unearthing this for me.
it's predominantly women. Let's not forget that.
Oh,
Well, I mean,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
definitely. I
yes.
have interacted with male social
That,
workers
I'm
though.
saying that's like, oh, that's a woman's, that like back then it's like, oh, you can't.
So
be-
it has historically been a women's
you can be a social.
job.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the Smith
Mother,
call, that's, yeah.
Cops don't mother.
It's nurturing, or yeah, it's supposed to be. But
It's
so
nurturing.
I have been, I have introduced myself like in first sessions as a therapist, and clients have really negative reactions to like finding out that I'm a social worker, because they've had like horrible interactions with the child protective system. And I have to explain like, well, it's technically the same thing, but not really. And here's why. And like, that's so like hard to hear for me. You know what I mean? It's like,
No,
such a shame.
that is really hard. I will say though, like, but I think the working class may actually have a good amount of interactions with social workers because of child protective services, hospice care, when you're in the hospital, and just case management. Like you said, in the schools, if you have an issue with your kids, you may have a social worker come.
But you probably have a mandated reporter like myself who has
True.
to report to the state if they feel like there's a threat of harm to whoever, someone over 60, someone with a disability, or a child. And like, I could face time if I don't report a situation that is dangerous.
You don't have to.
What's that?
I was being tongue in cheek, but you don't have qualified immunity like the cops do?
Unfortunately not.
To
Isn't
get you
that sad?
maybe they'll give you qualified immunity.
I know.
State
I
has
know.
no problem explaining away a death. It's like the end of Burn After Reading. It's like, that guy is dead. He's dead.
I mean, and not to be flippant, but like there have been many deaths of children under DCF care. And what they do is the same thing as what they do with the police. They throw money at the problem and it doesn't fix anything. And again, it's not to discredit the extremely hard work of the social workers in that organization, but it's just not fixing the problem. We have to be honest about the fact that like, it doesn't matter how much money they're throwing at it, it doesn't solve the core issue, right? Like,
how people end up in the system is exactly as arbitrary as the policing to prison pipeline, school to pipeline. It's like, really, it's like, it does come down to your class, comes down to your race.
Right.
And
the numbers bear that out. Like, people can fact check us, but
oh no, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, since you're on a platform where we are all about the working class aspect, like what's your pitch to the people out there that like have like that you think you can convince that they won't chuckle at a social work stereotype next time they're watching a rom-com? You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? That question makes sense? You don't have a pitch like, hey, like we're people too. Like, what's your
pitch for my profession
and community policing for social work? Like, what's your
meaning, like why we should replace cops?
No, just like to take the name back for social workers. You know what I mean?
I mean, okay, like I do
talk about the negative inference on in media, you know, like the jokes, and it's like they're always kind of like wearing outdated clothes or whatever. It's like,
got it. Okay, yeah.
And it's like they're the HR of the government.
Oh my gosh.
Not there.
Yes.
Not there for the worker. They're there to protect the government.
Yo, we are the HR. That is real.
Like, how would you spin that? Like, the cops are like, no, we're your friends. We're not the principal enemy. We're the pal.
Well, I do like that there is a code of ethics though, and how Bridget talks about it. So I think, Bridget, not to put words in your mouth, but I would hope all social workers.
Constitution.
No, but I would hope all social workers reflect on the code of ethics and the way that Bridget has spoken to us, because I can just tell that you actually do care about people and are passionate about that code of ethics. And it does sound that like if people really focused on what that meant, it could enact more change, a good like stable foundation to think about things in the way that you've explained them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the profession cares about it. Like almost, I would say 50% of my LICSW exam was about ethics. And like they really hammer home like how to manage certain situations and how to do things ethically. And I used to run ethics trainings at the visiting nursing agency that I worked at, because a lot of like lay people don't quite understand like what the boundaries are and why they're important. Anyways, to Spencer's point, my pitch would be, I think there's so much good that we can do. And I think, you know, there are tons of social workers that deeply care about ethics. I'm not like unique in that way. And I think, you know, I don't know, like we're a helping profession. That's like the whole point. That's like the definition. I actually looked it up today because I was like, what is social work? It's like the OG helping profession. So, I mean, I always tell people like wherever they're at, like ask for a social work referral, make them work. I'm going to see what they're going to do. Like I tell all my friends and family, especially if you're in the hospital, ask for a social work referral, make them come through and do a consult, see what they can offer you. There might be something. And often like people just don't know to reach out because they feel embarrassed or they feel like I don't really need the help or whatever. I mean, I am an extremely passionate social worker. So like, as much as I kind of like threw shade on my profession, I think that we do a lot of good in the world too. I just think we can become more radical. So I'm going to hit you guys up with some, some content and some like accounts that people can look at if they're interested, because a lot of times it is so aligned with the status quo and like, just like maintaining, what's there, and people they're so caught up in the job that they don't think outside the box of like what's possible and like reimagine the system. And I heard almost every single professor I had said, your job is to put yourself out of business. You should put yourself out of work. That would be you being successful. So that was what Simmons was like. And I don't know about other schools, but that's what I heard over and over again. So you should be working to make yourself like, unnecessary. So yeah, there's some really rad organizations that are doing some cool work, trying to reimagine the system as a whole and kind of like break things down. So I will offer those links for sure.
Yeah, and we'll share all those links for social media accounts that you follow and interact with, and other materials like books and
yeah, there's a couple of books. I don't know if people would be interested, but I have some things that I can offer if people are. I mean, a lot about just like the family carceral system and kind of like the harm it does. There's a lot of documented evidence about the harm it does and how we might be able to reimagine that system. So yeah.
Yeah, we like to give other people credit for their ideas too.
Hell yeah.
Community effort, and it's not really about giving credit, because this is it's for your fellow humans. I know some of us get a little fiery sometimes, but like if this doesn't like tweak you a little bit, like some people come out a little hot, some people get quiet, some people break things in a closet somewhere. I mean, it's okay, deal with your shit the way you deal with it, but like if you're not a little enraged, like I'm gonna like Bridget, you want to stick around for the final segment before we sign off?
Yeah.
I have a good final segment today.
Oh yes. Okay.
If you're not mad, you're not paying attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's
Exactly.
there's shit every day, and I like to highlight stuff on the Twitter machine while it still exists. I want to give a shout out to some other accounts. We always post. What the long story short, I'm being in a roundabout way saying we always like to share our links and where we're getting stuff from.
Yeah.
Or people that have challenged us, because it's about challenging. Bridget Bridget's here, Bridget will tell you, like, I was a nihilist. So I wasn't a fascist, but I just didn't care if fascists existed.
You thought it was an inevitability, I would say.
It was like, these fuckers don't go away.
Right.
I grew up in kind of an authoritarian household. to traumatize people. So like, but it comes out as authoritarian. It comes out as the same result in the end of the day. So I kind of was not like cynical. It's like, ugh, like shit's been fucked my whole life. So like, what does it matter?
I think if I can put one last plug in for social work, because our relationship has been, I am just as pissed off, if not historically more so, about these issues, but I have like a fundamental hope for humankind, or did. But I would say you agree that I'm a glass half full, you're a glass half empty type of fellow. But we both like have the same ideals. But I think what I do every day involves watching transformative change happen in front of me. I've watched people change for the better, and it is possible. And I've watched systems change I've been a social worker since 2009. Like I've watched things progress in a positive way. So like I have complete hope that it can happen, but it takes like the people within the system working for that. So yeah.
Well, we'll share all those links as we always do with every
There's some quick like Instagram accounts you can follow that are so rad, that are like doing really cool work.
We like the TikToks and the setters around here. I mean, whatever floats your boat. I mean, if there's we're not on Tumblr. I think
I'm personally on Tumblr.
I didn't know that was a thing until like
oh, very much.
I don't know if my account still. I don't know if my account still exists actually, but I was on Tumblr.
We're on, we're on all the hippity hoppities and the social and the except no, we're not on True Social or Gab or Telegram. We try to stay away from the Nazis, but
do the Weed Out readers read books?
Yeah, you can suggest books. Okay. You can suggest other podcasts.
Is this a literate audience? No,
you can suggest. You can suggest.
I mean, how else you gotta, if there's something
NOP, audiobooks, whatever. I just was curious whether that was of interest. I was being
of course. I mean, I like reading, so that's even for me.
I actually like audiobooks. Shout out. There's
shout out to audio processing disorder.
To get a subscription to the Boston Public Library, and you can get free audiobooks all day.
Wait, this is a hot tip for sure.
Yeah, we could probably we should post that on the website.
We will post the link to that, so if people don't know that they can do that, and you can do it in like Springfield, Boston, and like a lot of
the big cities. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good time, man. I've the books are on tape, or especially if you drive or you walk a lot or whatever you do.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, so that's we always like to share the links, and please visit the website and follow us on social media, whatever works for you. We try to be everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. So I guess, Bridget, thank you so much for taking the time to contribute, and look forward to doing more discussions in the future.
Hell yeah. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Before we go, I tease the
oh yeah, do I get to stay around for the segment?
You are so welcome.
I'm gonna sit quiet. I'm gonna sit quiet and listen.
Okay, well, no, you can participate. It can be a free for all. I have my thoughts. So it's the ghoulery tomfoolery, it's wow. Like this is where you get your nominations for the annual Weed Out Malarkey Awards. And the reason I want to call it the Malarkey Awards, this is actually like, it's very important as a white man to make fun of yourself. I feel like it helps the other communities that are kind of like, fuck these white dudes. And because I agree, fuck us. So like, make fun of yourself a little bit, that's how you like soften the thing. So malarkey is a very like white American vernacular English, malarkey, tomfoolery, ghoulery, that's my word. But anyways, this kind of stuff, it's really a bummer. There's a local and a national tie-in. Joanne and I were talking about this last week. So it just goes to show you, like we talked earlier about Bridget, the stereotype in her field, it's like, drab, whatever, a nuisance, government HR. But all every show is about the authority, the cops, the fixing the issue, usually breaking the rules, but it's cool. because they're getting the job done. John McClane. And in Chicago, one of the most, Chicago's been literally under reform since 1960, since John Daley, or Mayor Daley, the famous mayor. So that town, we always, the right wing loves to always point to Chicago being a mess. And they always like to talk about black on black crime, which we all know is a racist dog whistle. But they have an officer who was assigned desk duty almost 2 years ago because he participated in the January 6th insurrection. And after review and being on desk duty, they didn't fire him. He's good to go. He's back, baby. Dude literally tried to overthrow. It was part of a mob. He broke like his oath. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. No outrage from the national media. Nothing. Absolutely fucking nothing. And then down in Holyoke, there was a really unfortunate incident. And this is what happens in depressed neighborhoods. There was a gun violence issue at the Unicorn Inn, Bridget, is that what it's called? And it's like a working class, it's in the flats. It's you know, it's not the nice end of town, whatever you want to call it. And unfortunately, there was a violent incident between two civilians. And I'm going to keep the details simple because to me, it's not really about the story. It's about how this is about two private citizens and versus how the federal government is treated. The police are treated by the media. So the police, no question, no problem. Like this guy in Chicago, he gets to keep his job, whatever. And he like very clearly was a part of the riot. Like the fact that WWLP and Mass Live take a press release from the Holyoke police identifying a black man and just running it on the front page of their website, suspected shooter. So in a predominantly not white area, you just identify, like any Yahoo could take it upon themselves. They could identify the wrong person. Cops roll up, somebody's dead. So it's not victim based, you know, are we sure it's this person before you put them on blast? And like, there's all these trickle down effects that could happen and maybe they'll find the guy. But the other thing that's playing into this is that nobody in the neighborhood's talking to the police. And I'm sure people would have information if they trusted the police or they trusted that the system would work and they don't want to destroy their neighborhood anymore. And it was probably something, and it doesn't excuse the behavior, it doesn't excuse the crime. It's the system. It's like this cop in Chicago, no problem. He's going to keep his pension. Dude literally tried, wittingly or unwittingly, was part of an attempt to overthrow the United States government, which I thought was the most like ridiculous crime you can do. Treason, right? So I just don't understand how the focus is on you know, regular average 30-something-year-old black person, dark-skinned person, is this vigilante out in the street. He's a danger. It's like, no, there was an altercation between two people. This doesn't justify the press release. Why is the media running with it and plastering this guy, this individual? Yes, is accused of a violent crime. And they even say suspected. I mean, that's suspicious.
It goes back to like Northampton Police Department not choosing to release those bug shots and other police departments just using the SPR.
Yeah, and this is some pre-internet ghoulery. This is how it used to work back in like newspaper clippings. So in the community, there's twofold. You either pressure the local community to bring forward information because they're afraid that they might get caught up in obstruction of justice if they feel like somebody else knows something and the chain breaks down. So there's that issue in politic in the neighborhood. And I'm just being real with you. This is how it works. And then in the white neighborhoods up in the hills, they're all scared and it's confirmation bias. And the cops are like, we can't do anything. Guess we need more money. And rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And a month ago, there was a ShotSpotter, like pro ShotSpotter. We're so lucky to get ShotSpotter op-ed in the Gazette. And it was written by the ShotSpotter rep. Like,
Also, guess what wouldn't have caught this shot? It was not in the neighborhood they're going to put the ShotSpotter.
is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know it was that.
It was on High Street. They were going to put it in the flats.
Regardless, how is this going to solve the problem? It's like the crime, like we want to encourage people to be living good enough lives, baseline, that they're not stressed out, sick, ill, depressed, all the things we've talked about in this episode. But at the same time, we also like baseline, wow, like that cop in Chicago amongst, I mean, how many Oath Keepers were uncovered in Massachusetts that are in law enforcement or in local government?
A good amount. But if Chicago's been under reform for 60 years, that's like a really good case study of like reform just being a complete failure.
Reform.
How many?
You could actually reform the social work industry because at least their tenants are already pointed in the right direction. You just need to deal with the fact that it's not intersectional, which is most of our problem. Like, we can be a good person but not understand intersectionality, and you could be a good person straight on, but you might not be able to see how everything's playing together. So like, the social work's halfway there, whereas cops are just like, they're like, nope, that is wrong. We don't do the thing that keeps people alive. We're either going to bleed you down in the cage over time, or we're going to kill you in the street.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's punitive inherently, right?
Anybody gets in our way, they go bye-bye.
But it's, what's interesting is like, sorry to like hijack your section here, but
Good. No, please. This is Ghoulery and Talk.
What-
That's really the segment. To think about that, and if I would love to hear both of your thoughts, because I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. So it's just like,
I like the juxtaposition of those two incidents in a way, because yeah, it's such like different aspects of
resources, just from my capital.
right.
I'm looking at the fucking budget line at work. Like, this makes no sense. Allocation of resources by a company, by the even if you're looking at resources as like security and safety, like this doesn't, what, that guy's more fucking dangerous. Like, what are we talking about? He has a badge and a gun, and you gave it back to him after he broke an oath. Like, wittingly or unwittingly, he's a cop. He should be held to a higher standard. It makes no fucking sense.
So I'm like the Facebook ambassador of the household, because Spencer is not on Facebook, and God bless him, because it's a cesspool, but I'm always like reporting to him what the Hello Holyoke Facebook group is doing. And overwhelmingly, people want more policing, and they want ShotSpotter, and they want this person brought to justice. And it is bloodthirsty on there. And I understand. I think if you either live in a community that experiences a lot of crime, or haven't thought critically about the system, like I think I completely understand that take. So I saw a lot of people after the Unicorn Inn shooting talking about like, get this dude, like whatever. And people, the public expects to see them on the news. That is a common practice for them to say, this is the suspect. Should it be? Absolutely. Like, that's outrageous. Like, you are innocent until proven guilty. It's outrageous that they're splashing your face across the news, but people expect it.
It's a scare tactic.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
But
it's
it's-
also like, do your damn jobs. You're the one we're giving money to find this fool. Why do we got to do it for you? Are you kidding me?
But I
Well,
do
it's-
understand too, wanting to be safe in my community.
Right. So
if that's all if that's the only way that you
Right.
know of being safe,
right.
then like the police are doing a good job with PR, because they're keeping you afraid. They're keeping you, and like a shooting is actually unsafe.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And like, I was planning to like meet up with my friend at that bar and this week. It's a bar that a ton of people go to. It's like not like known as an unsafe place or whatever. So, and like, I think it's clear that it's a scare tactic, but what I just want to give the insight that probably feel like they're responding to the public who is like demanding a response or whatever. But again, that's just because that's the pattern that we're all in as a community. You know what I mean?
An ethical cop would be trying to put himself out of business. He's
100%.
Exactly.
We also can't prevent, like, we have a gun culture, guys. End of story. Like, like, I'm not saying everybody has a gun either. I'm just saying we need to address the fact that we like guns.
And police can't possibly prevent gun crime because of how many guns are in this country.
It's just a way to target Black people. It just is. Like,
100%.
it's statistically proven. Even if they're legal, then it's a reason to shoot them because they fear for their life. And they do this to poor white people too.
100%.
More bodies, but at a lower rate. Like, regardless, this is how they gentrify. This is how they extinguish people, extinguish voices. And it's really insidious. And I just want to point this out. This isn't by mistake. I have a nickname for the PR team over at Holyoke PD because, listen, he's the GoBot Joseph Goebbels. That's what he is. He's like, it's knockoff, low time, cheap shot, and it's like 1980s newspaper clippings. That's how they operate still, and it fucking works.
It does work. I mean, we've heard from community members. Bridget's reading it in the Facebook groups.
People are demanding it, in fact. So it's like, it's a reciprocal relationship at this point. I mean, but it's like, you do, like, to your point, you have to be a responsible leader and tell people what they should want versus what they're expecting because of past precedent. You know what I mean?
Yo, you can't keep selling me the same pile of shit.
It's actually amazing that people will accept the same pile of shit after this many years of worse shit every year. It's like,
it is honestly shocking to me that I like it. I
look at you like you're a damn insane person when you say abolish the police.
They
Truly.
definitely do. And that's why, like, I'm thankful. Like, I hope that people hearing from you, Bridget, makes them feel like, if they're isolated after these last 3 years of a pandemic, if they are dealing with all of the things that the system puts upon them, that they would reach out to potentially a social worker or a clinician or someone for help. Because, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not necessarily just child protective services. I mean, these people are going to try to help you. And I think resources are out there that we don't know about necessarily in a lot of communities, especially here in Western Mass. So I would love if we can include in the links, like even some resources where people, if you are struggling after all of these years where it's been, where we're just accepting more and more crap, where can we find those people that will help us and care for us rather than be left alone to like really just be out here wondering, like, what do I do? Do I keep just accepting like so much more being piled onto me? And I know there's not a lot that social workers can change about what's happening with the systems overall, but sometimes having someone even just be able to steer you in the right direction is really nice. So
yeah, for sure.
that's just kind of on the upswing.
Please share the tools, and it doesn't have to be, it's just, we need to also encourage people and talk about this stuff so that people have the vocabulary and the concepts to work with. Right. That's why we bring in a social worker. That's why to talk on the show. Like, that's why we.
Yeah. I mean, like I'll definitely link some general things. But please don't diagnose yourself on TikTok and decide you have all sorts of things and then not seek professional assistance. If you're feeling depressed or suicidal or any of those things, please reach out. I mean, yeah, I'll link some options to search for clinicians in our, I mean, Psychology Today is a great resource. So I'll put that.
Awesome. We can link for sure. And thank you for saying the thing about not diagnosing. I actually almost started laughing because I almost texted you a self-diagnosis earlier and I was like, stop reading this. No.
Well, it's hard because it's like in a sense, like a wonderful democratization of information, but there's a lot. And this is where like, I want some gatekeeping a little bit because there's people that don't know what they're talking about, telling you things as though they're fact. And that's the internet. That's Al Gore's internet, but you got to use some discernment.
In a non-hierarchical system, you still need people that are like, not everybody's going to be a butcher.
Information keepers. Absolutely. Absolutely.
We don't need that. We work as a team. We are a collective. Humans are social creatures. That's why you can't fall for the eco-fascist argument of humans are inherently greedy.
Totally individualistic. Right.
We got this big and tall literally because we work together.
Yes. Preach.
Yes, we had to exploit and subjugate people, and that's a habit we still need to fucking break.
Right.
We're doing it in Egypt time for all you Bible thumpers and your friends. I'm trying to give everybody ammo to deal with their crazy fucking Uncle Fred.
Oh yeah,
right?
there's a lot of Bible thumpers here.
I'm not listening, but
Listening to
we
us
know these people.
specifically.
It's like, listen, slavery existed in Egypt time, and we still got it in third world countries and here in the prison system. And the slave wage, the slave labor, the wage slave labor, and the leech off the government by like Walmart, Target, and how all their workers are subsidized by welfare programs and they're stuck in a loop. These systems all play together. Social work has a role, but at least we have good pillars in social work. So thank you so much for sharing that stuff. And we're going to share all these links on theweedout.com. Again, thanks for everybody taking their time. Bridget, thank you. We appreciate you and love you.
Thank you guys.
And everybody, that's it for me. I'll let Joanna sign off, but have a great week. And thanks for listening to The Weed Out.
Take care.